Welcome everybody to a webinar I'm really curious about. It's about our language, and I invited a really good friend of mine today, Sarah Urquhart, who you can see probably on your screens as well. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
Sarah and I have worked together for the last 10 years. I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself and share a bit about what she does. But the reason I asked Sarah to get involved with this conversation today is when we co-facilitate together, if there's someone who's going to give me some bloody good feedback on my language, how I say something, my tone of voice, my choice of vocabulary, it's always going to be Sarah. So I really value her knowledge and her opinion. And I thought, God, she would be a really good person to come share and bring some of her knowledge and learning to the rest of us. So Sarah, can I just invite you first, introduce yourself to the team and share what you do and a bit about you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kirsty. And as Emma may agree in what I'm about to say, is when Kirsty asks you to do something, you end up finding yourself saying yes, and then sometimes wondering how you agreed to do that. And it's all about the language that she uses as well. So today we're going to look specifically at language, but not just the words, also how we use our tone of voice. The reason why I'm so fascinated by language is about 23 years ago, I was having some quite serious challenges with a boss figure in my life, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And I had a lot of negative internal dialogue, blaming myself about the situation. And I bumped into, by complete accident, the subject of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And one of the key things that I was taught right at the beginning was, what are you saying to yourself and how are you saying it? And if you change the way you say stuff, it makes you feel differently. And a very long story short, I managed to use that one sort of concept to change my whole experience, and it sort of springboarded everything that I do with my career now. It came from that initial discovery and ability to just give myself more choice of how I felt and then how I responded to things. And one of the things that we learn in NLP is that your thoughts are a collection of your internal dialogue, which is your language, and the pictures that makes you create in your head. Then those things become your internal representation. They affect how you feel, and then that affects how you hold your physiology, and your physiology precedes your action. So whilst physiology and body language is such an important part of our communication to ourselves and to the rest of the world, it's often affected internally by the language that we use. Now, as coaches and facilitators, we know that we have a major impact on our clients through the work that we do with them, and the major way that we communicate with them is through our language. So I wouldn't say it was consciously a life study. It's just become something that I'm so interested in, and reframing myself has become a habit that from those 20 odd years ago, and it just is so useful. So Kirsty asked me if I could share with you guys some of the things that I have learned and I think about when I teach myself, when I'm teaching facilitators, when I'm helping coaches to be better at how they want to communicate. So if we can get into it, into the subject, I think that would help. And I know I was teasing slightly when I said earlier I am a psychologist. I am, because I wanted to understand the source of some of the NLP information that was around, because NLP has always said, if you want to turn the light on, you don't need to learn to become an electrician, you just need to learn where the switches are. And actually, because I was teaching NLP, I thought, actually, I kind of need to be an electrician. So I went and studied to be a psychologist as well. Cool. So it's added of values for me in my understanding, and also the source of some of the things that we learn about in NLP.
Sarah, before you go on,
yes,
can I just say to the group, if you want to ask any questions as we go, I'll be keeping an eye on the question box, and I can bring it in. I'm going to turn my video camera off because you really don't need to see my gormless face, just nodding and smiling at Sarah. So I'm going to turn my camera off.
Though. It's very encouraging, Kirsty, because I can't see anybody else.
I can stay on, but remember, I've banned Guillaume for 10 minutes of walking
Sure.
through.
No, that's fine. Turn it off. I just, for those of you who know about psychometrics and things, I have extroverted energy. So to sit in an empty room just looking at a picture of myself is a stretch sometimes. Go on then.
Stay on. I'll stay on. I feel guilty because I'm the extra sunshine yellow as well. Now I feel guilty that my friend's going to feel
but now you're trapping Guillaume in the bedroom. Or actually, I should. That could be interesting.
Sorry, everybody. We'll move on.
Anyway, moving on. Right, back to professional mode. So, before we get into the content, one of the things I would want us to think about is, what happens when you get told, don't worry? What goes on in your mind? And we'll talk later about the impact of negative language on our mindset as well. So when we think about what we want to say to people, we want to make sure that we put the right seed into people's heads. Similarly, what about when somebody says to you, I don't mean to be rude, but... So words are so powerful. They sow the seeds into our minds, and our minds are direction finders. And whatever you tell it, it will look for that, it will use that information. So if for example, if you go to a train station and you want to buy a ticket, you always have to give the train machine a destination. You can't just say, I want a ticket out of here. And your brain's a bit the same. So if you find yourself saying, it's not this, and don't worry about that, don't panic, what you are doing is putting those exact ideas into people's heads in the first place. And we're also going to be thinking about tone today. So, for example, how would you say the words I'm fine? So just 2 words, I'm fine. But how would you say it to convey happiness? What would change in your tone? I'm fine. Try that in your heads right now. What about if you were frustrated? I'm fine. So perhaps your teeth get a little bit more gritted. And what about panic? I'm fine. So our words and our tone of voice are very linked together because the tone is the emotion conveyor. So we're going to be looking at both of those 2 things today. We're going to be looking at words and our voices. Now, as I've already mentioned, words were the fundamental bit that I learned first when I learned about NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, but very closely aligned with the voice. So changing our voice to change the feelings can be really powerful for ourselves and also our learners. Now, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the Morabian and Ferris research that was done in the 1960s. And the output of the research was that when people are communicating, if we think about communication as being a big pie chart, the content or the words that are expressed are said to convey about 7% of the information. The vocal influence, the tonality, the rhythm, the pauses, the emphasis, all of those things are thought to be about 38% of our communication. And that leaves 55% down to the non-verbal forms of communication. So what we do with our faces, with our hands, with the rest of our body, our shoulders, our breathing, all of those things are also part of our communication. Now, also, if you look back to the original research about Morabian and Ferris, you'll find that these percentages are very useful because interesting actually, when you first look at this, you might look at this pie chart on the surface and say, well, are words that important? It's only 7%. It's if it's all down to body language, surely we don't need to worry so much about the words. But if we look at this, actually the research found that in 1967, Morabian was doing a series of research projects, and the first one he did was with a different guy to Ferris, somebody called Wiener, and they found that tone beat words. So they already knew that if people were hearing words said in different ways, the tone of voice gave a stronger communication than the words themselves. And then he went on to do further research with Ferris, where they found that body language beat tone. So what they then discovered was that when you are doing simultaneous communication, this is where the percentages came from, is that the weighted sum of independent effects, but it was all really connected to whether the message sounded congruent. So when we're unsure about what words mean, we do pay more attention to non-verbals. But when there is no discordance between the non-verbals and the verbals, the words become a much bigger percentage than 7%. So if somebody in a position of authority asks you to come into a room and close the door, those words have a much bigger impact than 7%. It's the same as, I hope this has never happened to anybody, but sometimes when somebody says, it's not me, it's not you, it's me, we're over, and you get dumped, those words are again much bigger than 7%. So this is why we need to focus on it. And I know Kirsty does wonderful stuff on body language in her delivery classes too. Today we're going to focus on the words and the tone of voice. So there are times when we want to think about language specifically, and I would like to launch the first poll, and I'm going to invite you to do some voting. So I've launched the poll. Poll must be closed to enable screen sharing. Poll is distributing. Kirsty, can you see the poll?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute.
Great. So we're asking you to tell us when we should think about our language specifically.
So we can choose any of these or all of them?
Yes. Oh, the percentages are... Right, the poll is complete. Fantastic. So 100% of people have said all of the above. Absolutely. I knew I would be talking to a lot of wise people this morning. So, Kirsty, forgive me, do I have to publish these results? What do I do? Press ready to close. Is that right?
Yeah, you do that.
So I press close.
Oh, I've done it.
And show poll share. There we are. Everyone can see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can. And no one's telling me they can't.
Okay, good. So I'm going to hide that then. So there are all of these times to think about when we are facilitating with our language. And we definitely, in the welcome space, we want to be able to create a safe space. We want to get people to think about the housekeeping elements, how we want them to, or how we want to set our expectations for how to deal with interruptions. All of those things would be taking place during that welcome, making sure people know they're in the right place, that they've read the joining instructions and the outcome of the event is for them. All of those things would be in the welcome. We'll go into the detail of these after this. We want to build rapport. We want to make sure that people are feeling connected to us, that they're feeling that they trust us. Going back to the Morabian and Ferris research, when people are feeling distrustful, then that's when they start to not notice the language so much, and they're looking at your body language. So it's good to make sure that your body language matches the words you're using too. When we're setting expectations, we want to think about the energy we want to convey and the if we want to do activity, we want to bring our energy up, because it's very difficult to get a group of people to get out of their chairs and move if you say, okay, stand up. So, what are we going to do with our voices as well? Getting buy-in to the workshop as a whole, to new ideas, to topics, and also engagement and exercises, or just getting people to answer questions. Briefing them on the topics, the exercises, giving instructions, and what we do with our language and also with our tone of voice. The debriefing, making sure that we are asking questions that get people thinking. And also the close, how we do a really fabulous close to bring that energy and to harness people's attention. And Kirsty hosted a session last Friday, a live face-to-face session where we were talking about opening and closing, and I'm sure she'll publish that and do a blog on that at some point in the future. So all of these times are opportunities for us to think about our language.
Can I be really honest, Sarah, though?
Yes,
I know I actively think about my language probably like the first 5 sentences of what I'm going to say in the morning, because that sets me in like a good space.
Yes.
But I have to admit, some of my workshops, because I do them a lot, I do find myself on automatic pilot, and it's all, that might be a bit unfair on me, but sometimes it's just like an innateness, so there isn't any stop, consideration, pre-thinking. And I just wonder if other people are the similar, or do people truly really stop and think, right, this is what I need to convey in this conversation, or these are the messages that I need to put out. So it's me, I'm just really curious. So if anyone's just while Sarah's talking, maybe drop me a line in the chat or in the question box and just say, do you I know we've all said we think these are times to think about our language, but do we really think about it? Because I think that's my question to the group. Do we really think about our language?
Yes.
Because that's always the last, I think. I do consider my body language, but what comes out my gob definitely gets second place.
So it makes me think about the importance of our preparation. So if we know our content really well, then we can put more effort into the delivery of that.
Yes.
And the other thing that I suppose, because I learned to condition and reframe my what I was saying to myself before I was a facilitator and a coach, it's become something that I got into a habit. So I wonder if that might be the way to help ourselves as professionals, is to do that a lot of the time when we're just being our everyday selves.
So Neil Fogarty just said he's got kids, so he really does think about the words that come out of his mouth, because I guess he can't say certain things in front of small people. Laura, no, I know what works for me so far, and I stick to that. Amy was saying, hold on, everyone's going to jump down really quickly. She thinks about her body language and energy, however, the language comes second. Sophie, thank you. Once I get into flow and I feel the rapport is good, then I'm less careful about my language, but I am careful about my setup, and then I let it go, in the words of Frozen. Oh, interesting comment there. She said she is conscious when there might be a bit of a blip or tension or a potential break of rapport, you suddenly notice something again. Yes. And Ema said, first time running a training session, I write everything down that I'm going to say, but then once I've delivered it a few times, I know what I'm going to say, and I often think about whether there's other ways I can improve it. Cool.
Yeah, and I've really good observations and really good reflective questions that you're asking yourself, and where you're challenging yourself, where you feel that you're able to, and you're also working out what works for you. And I can't remember exactly who it was that said, I know what works for me. And Kirsty, to your point about, you think about your first 5 or 10 sentences, you probably find that you say very similar things in those first 5 or 10 sentences when you're with different groups. You can have the same sets of things that you say during other parts of the the workshops as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be that you're continuously thinking about, oh, what am I going to say here? One of the founders of NLP, I've done my NLP trainers training a few times, and I did one with one of the founders, and he was saying it's almost like you're running two tracks in your mind, that you're talking to the group, but you've almost got an audio of what you're going to say, and you're a few steps ahead of yourself in your mind, so you're planning what's going to come out of your head. And when you first hear that concept, you think, how on earth am I going to do that? But it's about where you place your attention, and so that can help. And the power of the pause, so pausing to get your words into the right order in the way you want them to be conveyed, is really good. It's just if the pause lasts for too long, then obviously that then starts to feel awkward for your audience, because they think, what's happened? Has the facilitator lost their train of thought, or have they died, or what's going on? So we can all find our own strategies, but we don't also have to have infinite number of ways to language things. We find the ways that work for us. So to bring up a bit of NLP, as I've mentioned it a few times, there are some beliefs in NLP. We call them presuppositions, and one of them is the meaning of your communication is the response you get, which is not necessarily the response you were expecting. So we do need to always make sure that, again, this is from NLP, with everything, know what our outcome is. Think about our audience, where they might be coming from, what their attitudes might be, and how do we need to language it to build that rapport. Some people are coming in really looking forward to the event that you're running for them, and others have been it's been suggested that it would be a good idea for them, and so they might need a little bit more coaxing to see that. So know your outcome. Dial up your awareness as you deliver your message. So if body language is such a key part of communication, check in with the people that you're working with. How is their body language reacting to your message? And unfortunately, because I don't see everyone's webcam, I can't see how you're receiving this message, so I really hope that it's going down well. And be prepared to flex, to change what you're saying and how you're saying it if the response wasn't what you expected, what you hoped for. If I may offer a body language awareness tip that I picked up a long time ago, was one of my mentors said to me, at the start of any event or workshop, find a way to ask the group a question where they have to think about it or puzzle in their minds for a moment what the answer might be. So I might generally ask something about who has signed in, if it's a sign-in sheet, or if there was something that the attendees had to do beforehand, to say, how many of you did the pre-work, or if there's a couple of people missing and it's a group that work together and know each other, who has got Kirsty's telephone number, for example, if we wanted to get hold of someone. And what you're doing in that is you're asking them a question that gets them to do some thinking, and you look at their faces to get an impression of what their faces look like when they are thinking about something or puzzled about something. And that can be quite helpful when you are then communicating during your session and you see that thinking or puzzled look. Whether it's time to clarify, have they understood, or give them a bit more time, or do a bit more pausing. So that enables you to do some flexing as well. One thing I wouldn't do is to get your delegates to panic in the first place, because you don't necessarily want to see panic across their faces during any point during your learning. But I found that very useful. And of course, depending on the size of the group, you may not be able to look at absolutely everyone all at the same time, but you get a sense of people's changing of their state. So one of the things we definitely want to think about when we are preparing whatever the session is what's our outcome. And it would be really nice to get some of you to share some of the outcomes that you think about when you're planning. So if you want to type anything in the chat box, I've got some suggestions, but what are the sort of things that you think about when you're thinking about outcomes? So it's your outcome, but also theirs. Kirsty, it'd be great if you wouldn't mind
just
reading those out.
How does a delegate feel? From Amy.
Great.
I think about getting the right tone so that people are settled. Ema, usually around a shift in thinking. Anna, how to build trust. Laura, the so what element for the team. So you've gone through the material, etc. What does it mean for them? Absolutely. Peter, creating the right environment for learning and how to take that back into the day job. What do I want people to experience? From Amy. Inclusiveness from Debbie, enabling those who are less comfortable speaking out to have a say in what it is and that it's okay. Terry, reassurance. I try and create an atmosphere where people feel encouraged to participate but not pressured. Agree on the so what too. Anna, how to understand and meet their expectations.
Fantastic. And what that really demonstrates clearly is how well you put yourself in your attendees' shoes. I have met facilitators in the past where they're mainly focused on it's all about them, and I can tell because you work with the School of Facilitation and you follow the School of Facilitation that you're already on the converted route, as Kirsty and I are. So
yeah, it's not about them. No, it is about them. It's not about us.
Oh, Kirsty!
I was about to say it's about us.
Well, you know.
How amazing are we? Sorry.
We got little egos too. So I agree with absolutely everything, and to formalise what we were saying in one place. So for any part of our session, okay, maybe in the beginning we want people to know they're in the right place and this is the right thing for them. We want to be setting the scene, whether that's right at the beginning or whether it's setting the scene for a change of topic or an introduction of a new subject, or a bit of participation or exercises to be done. We want to build rapport at the beginning. We want to maintain that because rapport is something that can be lost if it's not attended to. We want to be focusing people's attention into the room or into the virtual space, because I know that some of you are brilliant at running virtual sessions, and making sure that people's attention is not outside. So our language can be quite key to that. I do hear a lot of presenters and facilitators, one of the first things they do is they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I know how busy you are, and it's Monday, you've probably got loads of emails backing up. It's like, why would you be wanting people to focus their attention on that? So focusing there.
Give an example then of how you get your groups to focus their attention in the room. That would be really useful.
Yes, and I was planning to do that a bit later, but I could do it right now because I'm very flexible, and it's all about people maintaining rapport with the group. So it is about you're going to get the best out of your learning when you do this. Sometimes it's highlighting we will be having breaks. So if anybody needs to get hold of you or you need to reply to anyone, that's going to be the best time. And it's linked to what everyone was saying about making sure that there's a so what for people, there's a benefit to them. That's going to focus their attention. And as we were discussing last week or the week before last, Kirsty, on our openings and closings events, which I know you're going to publish information about, and maybe do a webinar on it in the future, who knows. It's also about the activity that you choose to do that gets people's attention in the room as well. We want people to feel safe, feel that they can contribute, as you mentioned. and working out the best ways to do that. If it's a larger group, perhaps you get them talking to just one or two other people before they speak up in front of everybody else. Feel ready to participate. So we want to build into people expectation and a little bit of excitement that I'm even in those, you know, real people who a lot of time in organizations are kind of like, oh, you know, I'm on another training course, and the arms get crossed. We might not be, it might not be huge excitement, but it's about that readiness to participate. And participants feel acknowledged, that what's happening for them at the moment, if there's changes and things like that, but without emphasizing and highlighting those, so that we keep our attention focused on what we want to be focused on. And also setting expectations, like housekeeping things and the whole psychological contract, which, if you haven't come across that term before, it's part of rapport. It's the unwritten and sometimes unspoken things about what we expect people to do, like, you know, coming back from breaks on time, and not taking telephone calls, and keeping their focus on what you're discussing. So those are the things that we want to be thinking about. What's my outcome? And then what's the best way to language it? So that's what I wanted to go into next. So planning our words. And as I go through these, it would be really wonderful for whoever wants to put things into the chat box about what are your examples of how you language some of these aspects. So as I'm going through them, please type away, and Kirsty can interrupt me at appropriate moments with those things. So planning our words, really thinking about what we want to say, what we want versus don't want. Now, this might be in terms of their behaviors. So, for example, if we say, you know, don't look at your phones, it's a bit like the same at the beginning where we said, don't worry. What is it we want instead? So one of the things I do is I'll often do a gesture as well, where I say, and as you find yourself sending the last email and closing your laptop down, because I do mostly corporate work and people get into the workshop room before the event starts, and they get on their laptops and start working. So it's that instruction for, we're going to be starting in a few minutes. So as you close your laptops down, and I do a gesture of pulling the laptop lid closed.
I've got an example from Sophie.
Yeah.
I'm moving to the invitation. I'm trying hard to move to the invitation is to X, Y, or Z. Having been more in tell mode, it's more of a please do this and that. So the invitation is to put your phone away. The invitation is to close your laptop.
Yes.
So tell me if that's right. My example that I do, Sarah, is people coming back from a break, and often, yes, they are on their telephones and they are on their laptops, and I say, it would be great if you could now either hit save, send, or delete, and close your laptop and put your phone away.
And that's the behavior you want versus you don't want, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about Tim Andrews, the Where's Your Spotlight chap that Kirsty and I both know. He talks about things like what works well. So again, it's less of a tell, it's more of a share.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other offerings on that one? Yeah.
Yeah. Peter was saying, and it's a phrase that myself and Sean Price also use. It would be great if. It would be great if you put your phone away now. It would be great if we now concentrate or focus our attention back into the room. Anna.
Wonderful.
Oh, Anna's, I like this one. What do you all need to be fully present? Debbie, I encourage you to ... She says she uses that a lot.
Yes. Yeah, some people use the I'm wondering if rather than the tell as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great. So we've got lots of invitations and ifs and stories that we tell.
Yeah.
Also, making sure that we focus attention on the positive rather than what's the negative. So this is time for your development rather than I know how busy you are. This is an opportunity for you to learn how to, rather than I know it's just another thing on your to-do list. So I did some work for an organisation where they were in the room learning something that was being imposed on them as an additional responsibility. And so focusing on the opportunity for them. And I also can hear the collective sighs sometimes when people have difficulties, and they're given it as an opportunity. So sometimes it's careful how we use the language that might be overused within the organizations that we're in as well. So focusing attention on the positive, having a balance of towards and away from. So this is a concept from NLP, that we have unconscious motivators, and they filter what we pay attention to and what we're motivated by. And there are some people that are motivated in different situations towards an outcome, a goal, an achievement, a gain, a win, size of the prize, that kind of language. And then there are also people, again, context will swing you in one direction or the other, who are more motivated in what we call away from, and they like to solve things, avoid things, ensure something goes right and not goes wrong. So having a balance of that language can be quite useful, especially when you are wanting people to to buy into doing something, taking on board a new idea. So having a balance of, and it sounds a little bit contrary to the want versus don't want that is the top point here, but want versus don't want is almost like how you want people to behave. The towards and away from is more about how you motivate them to be connected to something. And Kirsty, feel free to jump in with any other suggestions that have, or examples that have been shared as well. Inclusive language, very beneficial, and it goes along with the invitation type language that you were talking about earlier. Us and we versus you, you will, it's what we're going to do together. And this builds the rapport, keeps the rapport, encourages the group to feel like you as the facilitator are part of the group, that you're not there as the expert, as it were, because we know that so much learning happens from others within the group too. Kirsty?
I will admit a bugbear, because I've been suitably trained, and I know Peter, who's also on this call with us, he will use the we language, as do you, Sarah. So what we are going to do next, and when I work with other facilitators and I hear the I word a lot, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and it just all it does is it just reminds me that it's just not about us. And when we use I a lot, it can it's not inclusive, because it's putting us back into that spotlight space and putting us into the frame of, for some people, and this is really unconscious, guys, it's like that teacher. Remember, our teachers used to say to you, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. And as adults, we're there to facilitate them. It's not, and it's also not about what we want them to do, it's how we're going to do it as a team. So just think about when you're asking questions or giving instructions for exercises. So next, we are going to do an exercise that explores questioning and listening, versus I want you to do an exercise.
Yeah, and another way you could say is let's look at this now, through this exercise, which again is inclusive language. I was fascinated. I first came across this with Tim Andrews, and I went back to my NLP notes, and because NLP, a lot of it was modelled on therapists, and specifically Milton Erickson, which is more of a hypnotherapy type of way of using your language. There is a lot of I'd like to invite you to, I'd like you to, and I wonder if we've picked up those patterns from things like that. So that's an area to explore.
Terry just said, and there was a smiley face that went with this, is an exercise like a school thing as well. and use activity instead.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, and if you don't like
Good
the gym,
observation.
it's not a great word, because this is one of the other challenges that we have about many of your communication, is the response you get is that all words are semantically packed, so they have meaning. So if you say to someone, you know, we're going to do a test, some people go, yeah, love it, and some people go, shit, oh, I really hate that. Sorry, disgusting. I just did a swear word. Anyway, moving on. So confident versus hesitant language. So will versus try. Now, try, as Yoda said in Star Wars, there is no try, it's do or don't do. So try gives a opportunity for you to say, well, I tried, but it didn't work. And if you offer that to learners and you say, well, try this, it's open for debate, because if you've got someone who is feeling very unconfident about something, if you invite them to try, then often that's a great way to get them actually started, and then they find their confidence. If you use try too much, then it can suggest that you're not certain. So it's a watch out rather than never use. Similarly, if as happens sometimes when you ask people about their expectations and outcomes for the event that you're running with them, sometimes they'll want to cover things that's outside of the scope that you're able to do for the time or the outcome that the organizer has given you. So making sure that your language is about, this is what we are going to cover, and avoiding the, well, hopefully we might be able to, possibly, if we have time. So watch out for those hesitant words that can, because all of this is optional and conjecture, it's not absolute, but it can suggest that you're not a safe pair of hands as the coordinator and facilitator of that group. Using all 5 senses. So when you describe things, we all have a preference for 1 or 2 senses, often over the others. Bringing in that wide variety of senses enables people to build their own internal representations or pictures of how you're describing things. And alongside that, also having a good smattering of non-sensory predicates to allow people to create in their minds using the senses that are preferred for them. So words like notice, remember, understand, learn, those are non-sensory predicates, and they allow people then to decide whether they learn by taking on board and, you know, a more kinesthetic, or whether they learn by visualizing things, or whether they learn through an auditory sense. There's the IU switch, which is really helpful to use the inclusive language and also get people to think about their own experience by you sharing an experience from somewhere else. So within the same sentence, you switch from the focus being yourself to others, or sometimes it might be people and then you. So an example here, and it's slightly long. It was the best I could do at the time when I was writing it. Most people's brains are easily distracted. It's the novelty factor. I know I can get distracted easily. That's the I bit. Therefore, to keep our focus on what we're doing, what's the best way for us to deal with your phone and email distractions? And what you're doing is you're not doing that direct, put your phones away. This is a safe place. It's not like the Harry and Meghan wedding where everyone's phones were taken away from them for the evening reception. We're not doing all of that. So it's the switch between, I find this, you may notice. And what that then does is it allows people to decide for themselves, and it's a softer way than just saying you directly always. So that's the IU switch. Also, in the planning your words, thinking about the benefits, what's in it for them, with them, what's in it for me. So the benefits to the participant, languaging that, what they'll get out of it. And you may be familiar with David McClelland's needs theory, that there are 3 needs that are we have a combination of them. We're not all only needed. We don't have only one need out of these, but people kind of like a bit of achievement. So building in some language around them being able to make solutions, or their performance will be improved, or they'll get positive feedback, that gives us a sense of achievement. So including some motivational language around that. People also have a need for affiliation, so including some language for them being able to interact and have camaraderie and social connection. And people also like a bit of power, a bit of influence and a bit of control. So if you're in, and we have all 3 to varying degrees, we're not defined by just one of them. So building in a little bit of giving people the sense that they will get achievement, affiliation and power within the new material that they're engaging with, the benefits for them. So perhaps an example might be learning how to be better facilitators will allow you to work better with people, get them talking to you, get their opinions. That's the affiliation. Also will enable you to really help people solve solutions and get you and them feedback that this is working. That's the achievement. And wouldn't it be lovely to be able to influence people to get the right things for them? So that's your little bit of power coming through. And what you're doing is you're offering those, I think it's called the cover all bases technique, where you're saying we know that everyone's motivated and has needs in these areas, but I'm not going to assume that everyone in this room has the same needs, so I'm going to cover a variety of those.
Sarah, I'm conscious we've got 5 minutes until the hour, and I was wondering if we could see if anyone's got any questions for you that they haven't expressed, because we did pop an email out and I didn't get anything back. So I was just wondering if anyone's got any questions for Sarah based on what we've discussed so far this morning and what you've heard, or if there's anything that you've had burning in your minds that you really wanted to put in the mix. This is your opportunity. Or if there's other language topics that we haven't covered this morning that you would love picked up maybe in another webinar another time. Debbie, I'm often torn between, oh, you're going to love this one, Sarah. I'm often torn between using humour, because I'm very funny, and staying credible. Any tips?
Oh goodness, that is one of those big questions, isn't it? I would say it's about timing, and it's also making sure that your humor doesn't detract from your message. So I think I love humor, and I think humor is for me personally an essential part. I think it's my number 1 value is fun. It's an essential part of anything I'm doing. There are times when something occurs to me that I think it's hysterical, and it's just not the right time to share it at that point, so I just don't. Yeah.
Debbie's just said maybe that's another webinar using humour in our facilitation.
Yeah, I agree. And also I've attended some really awful sessions on how to have fun, because people, when they talk about it, sometimes just make it really dry. So yeah, that would be a good challenge. Debbie, maybe you're the volunteer, but who knows?
Emma made a really good observation about that. Is there a belief in there that the 2 are mutually exclusive? Credibility and humour.
Yeah.
Ooh, Emma.
Nice
provocation.
Challenge. Yeah.
Amy, if you use language and then think, oops, I shouldn't have said that, worded it that way, how would you recommend handling it?
So rather than highlight it and go, oh, there, you know, unless the whole room kind of looks at you in a bizarre way, and you might just say, let me say that another way. Otherwise, you can just say it in another way.
Yeah. Do you not think there's some of us, for some of us who are the extroverts who who speak to think go blah 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 blah, and then I've done it myself. I've gone, oh god, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have said it, I shouldn't have said that. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I think you find your own way. I would discourage too much apologies. We are women particularly apologise more than men, and you don't always need to highlight if you've made a mistake. You can just say it's something different. If it's if it's a real gaffe and everyone's sort of giggling about it, then I think that's quite a good time to bring in the humour. It builds the rapport. It shows you're human.
Yeah. Well, has anyone else got any other questions? Amy says, thank you for your reply, Sarah.
You're welcome. And I'm looking at my slides, and I've got more slides to show, and I'm frustrated with myself because I should have asked to do a longer webinar.
But we could easily do another one.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I ought to jump to tone, because we did say that we would cover tone of voice, and jump through a couple of the slides. Kirsty, are you going to make the slides available to people?
I can do, if you're happy to share them.
Yeah, definitely.
Guys, who's got time to stay on for 5 more minutes? The easiest thing to do is, if you do a show of hands in the attendees, you can click a button and raise your hand, because I do appreciate we said this was to 11. Sarah, look at this.
I can't see. Let me see. What does it say?
You can.
Oh, cool. Right. Thank you. Delighted. Love a bit of feedback. See, that's my need for achievement, a bit of positive feedback. Thank you, guys. Right. Sorry, I've said the word guys twice now, and third time, and it's one of my bugbears. If I'm in a group and the facilitator keeps saying, all right, guys, I feel like I'm not a guy. So, and I've just done it. Anyway, presuppositions in language. This is something else to think about too. So especially, it's all about questions. We know a lot in facilitation. When we are asking certain questions, putting some presuppositions, what we're presupposing, are very useful. So there's some great examples there. Who are you going to work with? We presuppose they're going to work with someone. What are you going to focus on? Again, presupposing that they're going to focus on something in particular. And then how will this help you? Where will you start? What's your question? What did you learn? How will you apply this? How will this change what you do in the future? Well, what will you do next time? Who will you follow up with? When do you plan to do that? Which one thing will you action? These are great language questions to get in your muscle and pull out, because they direct attention. Really important. So a couple of watch outs I wanted to cover. Watch out for the demotivators, bringing your words in, things like, oh, this is hard, it's very complex, it's tricky, I've made it basic for you, I know how busy you are. Those things that make people think about what you don't want them to think about. How would you word it instead? We're going to take this step by step. We've got 3 sections. We're going to look at each section in turn. It gives you a lot of in-depth, rather than, so you're saying the same thing, but you're talking about the benefits of the complexity rather than the fact that it's complex, for example. Doubt creators, watch out for hopefully. Now, if a few people made some if suggestions earlier, and again, if is one of those ones where it's a watch out rather than a never use. If does give some opportunity for people to ignore it. So if you say, for example, if you could be back in 10 minutes, there will be some people that hear that as an option rather than a definite. If you could put your phones away, again, people will hear that as an option sometimes rather than a definite. So what I tend to do is I tend to read the room. If I use if and I don't get the behavior I'm asking for, then I stop using if. I start using when, for example, instead. The perhaps, the hope, the maybes, the possiblies, all of those that create a bit of doubt. Apologies can create a bit of doubt as well. as the facilitator. Presuppositions. So just like we just talked about the presuppositions in the questions, what will you focus on? We are presupposing they're going to focus on something. If you use the word like yet at the end of a sentence, for example, we haven't looked at the difficult bit yet. Firstly, you're putting the demotivator in of the difficult, but then yet suggests it's to come. And also things like at the moment, they presuppose. So yeah, that's working for now or at the moment. So watch out for those almost throwaway things that we say sometimes at the end of the sentence and how that can change the meaning. And also justifications. So I'm not a massive fan of the why question. I really love to know people's why, but I tend to use hows and what questions to get those from them. So I'll ask, how is that important? What do you want to know about that? How will you use this? How will this benefit you? What will be the outcome of that? Rather than why do you want to know that? Why is that important? Why will you use this? Because it can lead to people doing the because and the justification and sometimes feeling judged. Watch out for your closed questions. I know that you are very experienced at questions. Just watch out, because even though we plan open questions in our minds, often closed questions are the ones that pop out. And for us extroverts, and I put my hand up fully here, watch out for our multiple questions in our language. For example, what did you notice? I mean, how was that? Did you find that useful? Or if we're on a more of coaching focus, what's your goal? Do you want to focus on? Is it this? So be careful for the multiple questions. It allows people to decide which of the is the easiest question to answer, but it also creates some confusion while people are trying to work out and process which question you are actually asking them. The other thing that I find a little frustrating is when facilitators do a really good briefing and they send you away to do an exercise, sorry about that word, an activity, and I just apologized as well, and then you come back and they go, so how was that? And generally the answer is good or okay, and it doesn't give you any useful information to work with. So things like, did you like that? Was that good? Again, notice a lot of them are closed questions. We want to be more focused. So go back to our presuppositions. What did you find most useful? What are the 3 things you're going to do? How are you going to implement this back in the real world, rather than those broad questions without focus? Now we're going to go on to tone of voice. So I got this tip from a voice coach. It conveys our emotion and our feeling. So if you really want to convey a feeling, just associate with, get into the feeling, and your tone will follow. And I found that the easiest way to emphasize the tone or the emotion or the feeling that I want to convey. It's also a great way to avoid a negative tone like sarcasm, suspicion, those sort of things, disagreement, because what you do is you stay curious as you're listening to somebody, and your tone will remain curious rather than perhaps you might feel defensive or challenged by somebody saying something. So just get into the feeling you want, and in NLP we call that associating into it, and your tone will follow. Try it out. Elements of our voice to experiment with. We've got loads of different aspects of our voice. We can change the speed, we can change the volume. The point about eye contact, I learned this from a voice coach, is that if you want your voice to go to the people right at the far corners of the room, if it's a big room, make eye contact with them and your voice will travel. So if you are facilitating a big group, make sure that your eye contact goes right to the back and then work your way forward, because your volume will follow it. Of course, if you're a big group, use a microphone, preserve your voice. But
Sarah, can I just check something?
Yeah.
Anna's saying her sound's gone. Has anyone else Can anyone else not hear? That's going to be a ridiculous question because you won't understand the question. Can you put your hand up if you can still hear?
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
So a few
people can't hear.
Yeah.
How ironic.
Shall I carry on because this is recording? Kirsty?
You can. You've got 2 minutes because.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Think about rhythm of voice, emphasis, or what words we want to emphasize, the tone we want to take, pauses. Make sure you pause at the right moment. So pause after a key point rather than in the middle of a sentence. And onomatopoeia. I love getting people who are practicing facilitation to take words like huge and make their voice sound like the word it is, or fast, or high. So you can bring interest into your voice as a facilitator by thinking, how would that word sound if I was reading it out in a children's book, for example? So I know it's a little onomatopoeia is more things like bang and woof and noises that sort of whiz and things like that, but also think about like huge and long and slow and all of those things. If we want to convey energy, I have just a couple of more points. Convey energy, passion, and motivation. Our volume needs to increase. Our speed often increases, and often our rhythm becomes more staccato. So come on, this is what we're going to do, folks. I'm exaggerating. Questions, we want to raise the intonation at the end of the sentence. But when we want to understand what people are going to do and get commitment from them, then we want more of a statement tone, so a flat intonation, even when it's a question. So what are you going to do? Not what are you going to do? It's what are you going to do? So we're asking for commitment at this stage. It's not a question. When are you going to do it? And if they say Tuesday, it's like commitment, tone of voice. So your own and others. So we've had a whistle-stop tour through words and voice. There is so much to this because language is the key way that we communicate as humans that is different from our body language and our voice. And reminding us of Morabian and Ferris, often the reason our body language and our tone is such a bigger aspect is because we have less control over it. We can have more control over our words and our voices and our body language when we think about them. So it's been great to work with you. Thank you so much for continuing to stick with us for an extra few minutes. And if you want more information about facilitation and the School of Facilitation specifically, here's the contact details. And I'm done, Kirsty.
Firstly, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Sarah for a whistle-stop tour on language, because I know what you have distilled for us in an hour has taken you, oh, she's gone now, look, she's hiding, has taken you probably, as you said, 20 years to learn. You're getting lots and lots of thank yous from the
you're really
team
welcome.
who are listening. So thank you for joining us and take care. See you soon.